All right, everyone. Rondesanctimonious. We're starting off today talking about the feud between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. This is a clip, link in the description. That's archived. There's a second one, actually. I'll read that one verbatim. It comes from Rich Barris, the People's Pundit, with his thoughts about what's playing out here. So Donald Trump, the other day at his rally. And first we'll talk about how wise this is as a strategic move. He labeled Ron DeSantis as Rondesanctimonious and then talked about, the fact that he's up massively in primary polling, which, by the way, I mean, the first analysis is this is a foreshock that Trump will be announcing that he runs for the presidency. He's expected to possibly do that in the middle of November, so only a few days after the midterms, which, by the way, is perfect timing. It's what I suggested. Some people were saying he'll probably announce before the midterms because he's afraid of legal things. He's got legal problems with the state of New York and the U.S. government. And I predicted that that probably wouldn't happen because it would make no sense. He's not actually afraid of them and fully intends to mount a presidential run. It looks like that prediction will be fulfilled. It'll be the story of the day not long after the midterms. As far as how wise it is for him to be attacking DeSantis 2 days before the midterms, I would say, Donald, you got to have a little bit more self-restraint here because it's not exactly the most helpful thing, because it looks like you're putting your finger on the scale for an important primary, which is the one in Florida. Now, DeSantis will win. He's ahead by more than 10 points now in the aggregate, mind you. Christ has effectively no chance and must be chuckling at this, but it's not really going to affect that race. If it were close, I don't think Trump would say it because then he'd be afraid of taking the blame if DeSantis ends up losing. He sees the race and all the polling there and probably figures, well, what the hell, I'll just kneecap him right now. Now, here's what Rich Barris says. Again, I'll read his statement out verbatim. Once I get the link, of course. Probably should have had that open to begin with. This is Rich Barris's take. I'll tell everyone what it was right now, though it's not the smartest fight for reps to have before midterm. I agree, it's not the greatest timing in the world. When Ron DeSantis is chatting with Kevin McCarthy and Team Paul Ryan behind the back of the man who made him governor of Florida, it was bound to happen. It's called a shot across the bow, and it's in response to what Trump has been hearing is going on behind his back, which is more than a half a dozen donors and scores of sitting congressmen have told me is true. I do agree that McCarthy and others wish to deny Trump the primary. They wish to deny him the nomination, rather. They've targeted Ron DeSantis as the stool they believe is their best chance to foil another Trump presidency. And after enough hammering away at him and blowing up his head, there are indications that it is working. Well, make no mistake, it is a D.C. establishment plan, and it is true. Apparently he's getting calls from donors, etc. So the idea is that DeSantis is actually a plant. Here's my skepticism here. I'm looking at the primary situation. I would like to point out a couple of things that Barris appears not to be taking into consideration here. We all know that there's a never-Trump faction within the GOP. Okay, that McCarthy's part of it. Yes, the Paul Ryans of the world, etc., are part of it. Mitch McConnell would prefer not to work with Trump again, I'm sure. Romney would prefer not to do that. Murkowski, who may or may not even continue being in Congress after a couple of days, clearly doesn't want him. There is that, he's correct, there is a network of neocons and donor classers and certain pundits that really hate Trump. They really hate him and they would love to deny him. Here's the problem. Part of the problem actually goes to the statements Trump himself was making at this rally, again, link in the description, which is that polling has consistently shown Donald Trump leading by 50 to 60 points in the primaries for the GOP. And that's assuming multiple opponents. In a one-on-one, of course, it would you would get closer, because some never-Trumpers would coalesce behind whoever the hell's running against him. So problem number one is Trump already has a coalition that involves more than half the voters. Now, it's not evenly spread across every state, but it is rather high in states like, Iowa, like Nevada, starting states, if you have a primary or a caucus at all, leading us into the second problem. Steve Bannon, who I keep returning to, did something very wise after the 2020 election, although I believe he got his start before that actually and was being preemptive. Bannon and others went into the states and they started trying to force out individuals who are engaged with the electoral system within the GOP and in the general process sense, precincting and so forth. They went in and they got their own people in there. These people are entirely loyal to Trump. They are entirely MAGA. That plus Trump's technical incumbency means that half the states are likely to suspend their primaries as soon as Trump decides to run and say, look, he's technically the incumbent. We're looking at the field. We're seeing, okay, Mike Pompeo, woo, Mike Pence, Liz Cheney, people who have no feasibility as general candidates. Trump is owed another term. We're suspending our primary and we're rewarding our points to him. This alone could get Trump at least very close to clinching without any actual primary process occurring, simply because states can suspend their primaries. Typically, this is done when you have an incumbent candidate. A few states might still hash it out, but many states will just say, look, they're the incumbent president. We're going to stand by them. They've decided to seek re-election. You're likely to see a situation in which a technical non-incumbent gains at least in part that same advantage. Where can DeSantis win then? Even a coalition of non-MAGA Republicans and every Democrat on earth probably still couldn't get him over the threshold because Donald Trump would still clinch. Because some of those bluer states where the ploy would actually work to give DeSantis the victory use an appropriation system for the primary points for the delegates that is proportionate. So it would still get Trump over the margin. I think rather Trump is not concerned about DeSantis running, and this is just sort of banter. I think that it's just, I notice it seems awfully coincidental that we're 2 days before the midterms, and the entire legacy media is making a huge issue of this, as opposed to, hey, here's new polling. Hey, here's new polling from specifically a bunch of competitive states coming in, by the way, on a weekend the other day, overnight, showing the Republicans vastly ahead. They're going in with a 3-point congressional generic advantage, etc., etc., etc. What I suspect will be the turnaround when Trump almost inevitably is the nominee. If he runs, of course, there's still the chance that this is all bants too, and he's not even intending to run. He's going to get on the podium November 14th in front of 10,000 people and say, well, I'm sorry, but you're on your own. Maybe you can go with Kerry Lake or something like that. And then he'll become probably the kingmaker of the race and extract political and probably economic favors as all past presidents have done. It's possible. I suspect he runs. When that happens, it fits into one particular line that is continuously heaped on the Republican Party now in general and Trump in specific, which is that it's an attack upon democracy. Trump is staging a coup within the GOP. Here are the receipts of all the MAGATs that are working in electoral positions and casting votes in favor of suspending state primaries, robbing you, the Republican voter, of the right to choose your nominee. The problem is that it's going to be generally rejected as a message because, of course, stacking in the primaries happens in both parties in basically every election. Just to be clear, it is not a fully democratic process because the parties have widespread latitude within their own primary process. Of course, it does come down to a vote, but it's more of an oligarchic end vote if you're suspending the primary. They'll simply say, look, Trump's technically incumbent. We're not going to have a lengthy primary. What the Democrats want is a messy primary. What they want, they know that Trump is almost certain to be the nominee. They're looking at the Democratic field and saying, Joe Biden, if he runs, there's going to be a real problem. The man can barely speak straight. If Kamala runs, like Biden steps down, she gains a quasi-technical incumbency. That's, okay, but she's not charismatic, she's not particularly intelligent, and that might not go over well. They can try to get Buttigieg in there, the problem being the far left hates him. So, goodbye to your large umbrella-style party. Half of them will probably vote green. Going on down the list, there aren't a lot of particularly spectacular candidates that the Dems can run, including their own incumbent, who I think it's a long shot whether Joe Biden actually does mount a bid. If he does, they may have a messy primary too, because at least the leftoids will grumble. Bernie may run again and garner 20-30% because of so much reluctance for Biden. Could even win. Could finally get his turn and then presumably, fucking have another heart attack on the campaign trail or something, which would be amusing. It would be a fitting end to the Democratic candidacy for 2024. Since they're probably going to have a messy primary with a lot of mudslinging and shit, they're hoping to provoke one among the GOP members. Because otherwise Trump just coasts to his re-election bid, enters the general election relatively unscathed, possibly taking DeSantis up as a running mate, by the way, in the process, although I think Rand Paul is the more wise decision. Of course there's shenanigans going on behind the scenes, and of course, to be clear again, Trump should not be making such statements right before the midterms. Save that ammunition for if it looks like DeSantis is actually going to run. I don't think that he will. He's insinuated that he'll stand down if Trump runs. The same is true of Cruz and Rand Paul. Who's going to run against Trump then? Mike Pence? Pompeo? Liz Cheney running would be very funny. Again, the problem is that some of the states will simply suspend their primaries. And there's not a whole lot that anyone can do to stop that because of Bannon's efforts. I don't know how many states it would be, but it'd be a sizable chunk of the electoral votes. It would take some of the proportional states entirely off the table as possible minority pickups for any challenger. So, I mean, if they are trying to stop Trump through this methodology, I just don't think that it'll end up working. I think that tales of a feud between Trump and DeSantis also have been overblown. It's an attempt by the legacy media to make the Republican Party look as fractious as the Democratic Party is, effectively. DeSantis has repeatedly said, though, that he considers Trump a friend. Now, we'll see if he reacts differently this time, of course. I don't think that he will. But it's possible. People around Trump have had to deal with him doing one-liners and jabs at them repeatedly. It is perhaps both the biggest asset to Trump, when he aims it at the Democrats anyway. The quips are really funny. And a weakness because he tends to partially alienate former allies. Like, look at Chris Christie. They looked like bosom buddies there for a couple of rallies, and then Chris Christie got shoved on his merry way. He didn't like it too much. He wanted to be a powerful, important man within the Trump administration, and just never occurred. That's about all. Peace out.